Hey everybody, how's it going? Welcome to my as of yet unnamed channel. I am here with Yang Yang Zhao, and we're just going to be chatting about art. And I don't know exactly what's going to come of it. Possibly fisticuffs, a Twitter war. I don't know.
You never know.
But we'll see what happens. So thanks for coming on. I figured you'd be a good person to sort of like chat about this. You seem to have a wide, broad knowledge of art and just in general stuff. So the topic, I tried to come up with, I was joking, the least pretentious name of the stream, but it was the most accurate, right? So the opportunity cost of pop culture art in Western civilization. And I think if you put Western civilization in a title, it like automatically gives it some gravitas. So I figured why not. And for this particular conversation, we're just going to stick to Western civilization just because
Sure.
it seems apropos. Actually, there's some people in chat. Hey, Creative Faye, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. Sounds like a great show. We do a draw stream on Mondays sometimes. It's a lot of fun. Dr. Mask, how's it going? Thanks for popping in. I'm excited for your book. I don't know if you have a launch day just yet, if you're still doing signups. The title is a little more highbrow than my usual streams, other than Esoteric, who I only know about 30% of. Yeah, the title may be misleading in its intellectual acumen, but we'll see what we can do. All right, so first off, I posted something on Twitter yesterday that it was very vague, and it was possibly surprising to some people. And I wrote it down just because I said, daily I wonder if creating any art that isn't religious in nature is worthwhile. I wonder. And again, that's pretty vague. And also a little surprising, probably coming from me. And some people had some responses I thought were good and actually meaningful. But after I thought about it, I'm like, you know what? I want to go in depth into what I'm actually trying to ask. And this question has been bugging me for a while. And I want to preface this with a few things. I'm gonna kind of vomit a lot of stuff at you at first, and then we can kind of go back and forth. So first of all, what this isn't, and it isn't like high art versus low art, comics and entertainment versus fine art and literature. And I don't want it to be that, because that's not really what this is about. That's been done 100,000 million times, and there's no resolution to that. And I engage in both. So it doesn't really, it's not a contradiction to me. So let's start off with the title. So the opportunity cost of pop culture art in Western civilization. So first of all, what's an opportunity cost? Just an economics term as far as trade-offs, right? So you do one thing, the cost is that other thing. So if you're going to watch Netflix, the cost is not mowing the lawn or something like that. And you take one job to be a CEO versus another job to be VP. So it's just trade-offs. And as the opportunity cost increases, it becomes A, harder to make that decision, and B, it's less clear on which path, which direction to go. So, if you're, to belabor this point, if you have a job offer for CEO making $200,000 and you have a job offer as a minimum wage chef, it's a very clear decision. But as that, maybe you're managing a regional chain of restaurants, and now your salary would be $180,000 versus $2,000. So as the opportunity cost goes up, it's less clear to see what direction to go. And I was thinking about this in any normal time that wasn't 2005, living in the apocalyptic times that we've been living in for the past 20 years. I don't think there's a high opportunity cost for pop art. I'm just going to call it pop art. I don't mean the Andy Warhol version of pop art. I just mean entertainment, comics, anything like that. and the opportunity cost wouldn't be that high because we have this 2,000-year-old body of work of art of Western civilization, and it's stored in museums and churches and in libraries all over Western civilization. So just because I'm doing a comic doesn't mean some piece of art isn't being made. And now over the years, over the past we'll say 80 years, modern art has strangled. First of all, modern art has
art.
What's that?
Modern art. Okay.
Yeah, it has utterly strangled what we consider to be, part of that Western civilization tradition, the Botticelli and Michelangelo and all that kind of stuff. So, all right, so first off, we've turned off the spigot of that kind of art. We'll say 80 years ago, just as sort of like a random thing. And that doesn't mean there aren't like 5 people in Europe right now doing amazing sculptures, but it's so small. It's virtually non-existent. So we've turned off the spigot, but we've also, and this is in the news, and it's really been bothering me for a long time, but it kind of hit like it climaxed the other day, is the burning of churches. It has accelerated to such a degree that in my head, I'm like, you know what? I don't know if in 100 years we're going to have any. The Duomo in Florence still might be there. The Vatican might be there. Like we might have 5 churches, but that's it. And churches, by and large, are these sort of like landmarks of history in Western civilization, right? The pinnacle of engineering, architecture, art, all of that. They're like little milestones, dotted throughout Europe and America. But as they burn, so do all of this, all of this art that is irreplaceable. And so now we went from a body of work, of art, to it's slowly shrinking, basically. It's shrinking via no new art is being made, but we're also losing the old stuff, implicitly and explicitly. If you go to the local museum, they don't really show anything that I would consider to be art anymore. It's virtually all terrible modern art. So it just kind of struck me. I'm like, 20 years ago, I wouldn't have thought that there's an opportunity cost to creating comics or something like that more in the pulp genre. But as we lose that body of art, I feel like the opportunity is going up. And in 100 years, are we going to have anything resembling or to track Western civilization that isn't a white canvas with a black box? I mean, I don't need to, everybody knows the horror stories of modern art too. I think that's like my basic idea.
Well, that is an interesting question. Starting out with the modern art, I don't think modern art is influential in the least. I think there are certain academics who want to tell you that it's influential, but when have you ever heard somebody talking about like, man, that Jackson Pollock was awesome, I can't believe that, or like, oh, the Basquiat blew my mind, you know what I mean? So I kind of disagree with you too that there's not really art being made. Art's being made all the time. It's all around us. I mean, look at the design on a Starbucks cup. Look at art. We live in a world that is so flush and abundant with art that we don't even really notice. Some of it is terrible, and art has become a lot more throwaway. It's a lot more disposable than it was. Like, if you were going to pay somebody to paint your chapel ceiling, that guy better do a pretty darn good job. Number one. And number two, you paid a heck of a lot of money, so you're going to expect that thing lasts. Whereas, every few years we're going to redo the logo for UPS.
So, I mean, that does bring up the point of like, and I hate to do this qualifier, but high and low art. I mean, there is a distinction between like the Annunciation by Da Vinci, and if you see it in person, it is just it defies description, and it is as good and timeless as what people claim it is. So I do think that sort of level of art. I mean, Horace H. Hoover will not be historically relevant in when they're digging through like the garbage heap of Western civilization in 400 years.
You never know.
It could potentially be important for an anthropological like realm or context. You know what I mean? But not in a fine art, in a something that represents the civilization at its height. I think that's fair, right?
Yeah. I still don't know that I would agree with that.
Really?
Well, part of the thing is our view of like modern art and what's popular is so warped. Why? Because for lack of better terms, like there's a cabal of university professors who have decided this is what's popular. Their friends in the media have publications, TV shows, and whatnot. They have said that this is what's popular, and also government. Like, not to get too conspiracy, but we do know that the CIA was paying for Jackson Pollock to produce works as a front against Russian style art. I don't know why you picked that guy, but while we had all this stuff going on, Frank Frazetta was in his prime.
Right.
And how many people were inspired by not only the comics he did, but just the book covers, album covers, individual paintings that he did. And you could say the same thing about Bernie Wrightson. I would argue Jim Lee helped to inspire a whole generation of people. And this is the art that people are actually jiving with. And that's important. It's just not talked about by our betters.
I think Frazetta is an outlier. I think that Buscema is an outlier. I would put both of them up against Da Vinci and Michelangelo. Like, I do consider them masters, right?
Absolutely.
But and they are creating art, and it's reached a height, as good as anything else. But let's not take the outlier. Let's take the random person, and I'll just use me as an example.
Okay.
Is it better? Again, let me ask you this: do you agree with the premise that our body of art is shrinking? And I don't mean good, bad, and ugly like volume, right? Quantitatively, I mean qualitatively. If the Duomo in Italy is burnt to a crisp, which can't really happen, but let's just say it does, we have lost something irreplaceable. And you can design as many Starbucks cups as you want, or cappuccino art, or whatever, even Frazetta or Buscema. Like, you can't get to that again. So it's irreplaceable. I would argue that Frazetta is great, but you could swap in him with Buscema and Joe Kubert, and they're still they're amazing. I'm not trying to diminish them, but do you know what I mean? So I see the grand total of, I'll call it sublime art just to sound super pretentious, as shrinking because, and again, I was using churches as the metric because there are thousands and thousands of churches. And a Catholic church in particular would have frescoes and sculptures, like every facet of it is filled with art, and it's gone. Now we're definitely not building those kind of buildings anymore, virtually ever, I would say. We're not really creating that art outside of outliers. So I just think in 100 years from now, what will we have that sort of will essentially describe Western civilization in the way that it has been described for 2,000 years?
Well, I mean, churches are great because they're effectively time capsules.
Right.
You can walk into 1300s Europe by going through a church. Part of the difference to me is just how art is disseminated. If you wanted to see art back in the old world, you had to go to where that art was, which is why you had certain cities like Florence, and I guess you could say Rome too. They were so important because they had a ton of the art. If you wanted to learn art, you had to go there to study it. Whereas now I can get everything I want on my computer. And it does two things. One is it sort of democratizes it, because I guarantee you, donuts to dollars, there are more people doing art now than there ever have been in the history of the world. And in a lot of ways, that's fantastic. But it's also bad because it means there's a lot more trash. And the other problem is because like a university system are pretty much grinding themselves into dust, and we've lost apprenticeships. Yeah, that's the word.
Outside of Darth Maul and
well, that's the rule of two. That doesn't give you many artists. But we don't have that anymore. So we're losing a lot of professional competency, I would say, in the industry. However, if you're talking specifically about future generations looking back at us and seeing what was good, remember, it's like political arguments. Like, this policy's better, that policy's better. When you're living in the moment, it's really hard to see a lot of times which would have been better. So we are inundated with modern art, modernists, with questionable Victoria's Secret models and all this other kind of stuff. But future generations, maybe nobody's going to know who Jackson Pollock was, because 100 years from now, they could say that's total BS. They had this guy Lydecker who was doing amazing artwork, and they could pick it up. So at some point in the future, Horace H. Hoover might be like, I don't know, people read Flash Gordon stuff now.
Yeah, that's true. Okay, I want to go through some comments. Okay, modern art, 30s, 50s, creative phase. Yeah, postmodern art gets into the experience being art. Yeah, and it's laughable. Museums I used to go into where was like maybe 80% what I consider to be actual art and 20% modern. Is completely flipped now. It's just, I don't even go to the Carnegie anymore. It's utterly worthless. And one of the funniest things, a little story, at Christmas time, they bring in like a 13th century nativity scene from Florence, and they put it on display. And that's the only thing that'll get me into the museum these days. In this particular museum. So, but you're sitting there and you're looking at this giant nativity scene from the 1300s. It's amazing, right? But you're looking around and it's like, hey, it's a wall of painted boxes. It's a circle on a. It's so ludicrous. Like when you see them next to each other, that the distinction is jarring. Contemporary art is now a day's art. I subscribe to Rush Limbaugh's school of thought. If I can do it, it's not art. That generally is true. Hey, Citizen Ronan, how's it going? Citizen Ronan does oil paintings. I didn't know that. Yeah, they're really good. Just do a Goya house. Oops. Don't sell yourself short. Well, they will think all the smart people wore vacuum cleaners on the heads. Yeah, who knows? It depends who finds Horace H. Hoover. They might think that it was a race of metal-headed people. One of modern art's purposes was to destroy the idea of high excellence. The idea that art is anything was born out of that. Yeah, for sure. It was a conscious effort to do that. They knew what they were doing, and they succeeded for the most part. But there is a distinction, like you said, like a lot of us, we know Leyendecker and Booth and all these like amazing artists, but the people in, that do the gallery scene and, are on TV.
They don't care. They don't care.
I think it was also to try and destroy the common person's perception of art.
Sure.
That's a huge thing. The Medicis in Florence would commission these amazing pieces of art, not because they liked it, because they knew the people would like it. That was the whole point.
Exactly.
The artists that did classical realism ended up going from galleries to illustration houses to survive.
Yeah, and part of the thing is the industry has been so warped because we have basically governments throwing money, and this isn't just the U.S. government. This is all governments around the world. They throw money at their artists of choice, and we also were able to support artists through regular employment, which is really only a thing in the last 150 years, and we're kind of heading back to a more traditional form, whereas the artist had a patron or patrons who would hire them to, produce regular works for whatever. How many artists now, even think about the comic artists, how many guys who were doing comics back in the 80s and 90s pretty much just do commissions now because the commissions pay a lot better. So we're heading back to that system. The only thing that's changed is now, instead of one fat rich guy in Italy, I can have like 100 people all over the world. I didn't say you were fat, or in Italy. But instead of that, you can have 100 people around the world who only have to pay a little bit to support you in your lifestyle. So I think that that's kind of where we're getting back to.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with any of that. I guess I just think of it as the long game, and I don't know if. Okay, well, let's just use comics.
Sure.
You mentioned Jim Lee, or it doesn't really make a difference at this point. The influence was very limited. Their niche, their illustration. To me, that's illustration, and there is a distinction between illustration and fine art to me.
Yes.
I know when I'm doing illustration, and I know when I'm doing fine art. And I know this is very unpopular to say to people that do comics. Like, nobody wants to hear, but I don't know what to tell you. Like, my niece needed some paintings for her wedding. She wanted these locations to put in the wedding. And as I'm doing them, like, these are illustrations. Like, there's something fundamental in your approach and in the subject matter and in the outcome that I'm like, this is an illustration, it's not fine art. Is Leyendecker fine art? I don't know. Is Rockwell fine art? I don't know. They're definitely illustration, and they're amazing illustrations. So, if we take it out of the realm of illustration and into fine art, does that change it? Is a Hardy Boys book the same as Edgar Allan Poe? Obviously not,
Yeah, but then again, there've been all sorts of thousands and thousands of plays, and images and festivals and whatever throughout history. Not most of them weren't very good, and it's the same kind of thing where when we look back at it now, it's what survives. It's a more modern example is listen to people talk about rock music from the early 90s now. And they're like, oh, it was an amazing time, Pearl Jam and Nirvana and the Smashing Pumpkins and all these bands and stuff. But for those of us who are alive, there was a lot of crap on that radio back then.
For sure.
It's just we've totally forgotten the Lemonheads and, all these other bands.
I think you can, and honestly, I think it's pretty stark, not to just use the Uffizi as an example, but you walk through the Uffizi and there are a million Madonna portraits up there. And in your head, you're like, they all kind of look the same, and you're thinking, can I not distinguish the difference between like the most amazing painting and just like a stereotypical one? And then you turn the corner and you see one of those amazing ones. I'm like, oh, okay, yeah. All of these other ones were just, people were cranking them out, but they just didn't reach like a certain level. But I still think like the attempt is there, and I guess ultimately that's what I'm getting at. Is it worth my time to not even attempt to do something that could reach a level of that? Is it worth anybody's time?
Yeah, well, I do think that right now, controversial take, I think that we are basically in a dark age, because if you look at what was a lot of art for? A lot of art was to illustrate extremes, right? Like you had Roman statues, like there were fat slobs that they were making out of marble. They were awesome. They were well defined. The women were hot. Um, and and it's more than just that. It's that there was truth behind a lot of the art that they were making. They were making, statues about heroes. Jason and the Argonauts and Perseus and all these guys because they were something to aim for. So art was seen as something like, I'm going to express my devotion to Zeus, and Zeus isn't going to have a dad bod. Zeus is going to be jacked. That lightning bolt is going to look terrifying because Zeus is awesome.
Definitely not Fat Thor. They weren't thinking Fat Thor.
Nobody was thinking Fat Thor.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the most offensive things that neo-pagans have seen in a long time. But I was going somewhere with that.
Sorry. They were creating art to to worship Zeus and shoot for an ideal.
Well, and it's a physical depiction, or you could say illustration of truth, right? Even though there probably weren't that many jacked people in Rome at that time, especially knowing their diets. But that's an ideal, right? So it's something that should motivate you to have an experience to make you want to be closer or to make you want to be more like that. But if we look at most modern media now, like if you've seen comic books in the last 10 years, or even I would say the Marvel movies since Captain Marvel, should we emulate any of those heroes? Captain Marvel punches out a guy and steals his bike because he tells her to smile. We don't know that Wanda kidnapping a town of 3,000 people to live out her fantasies makes her the bad guy, not the general who's like, we got to stop her. So this is what I mean. We're in kind of a dark age because a lot of the art in the various mediums that we have, they're not expressing truth. They're expressing a lot of nonsense, which not only is harmful in the same way that like only giving kids Oreos and ice cream to eat is harmful. It's not something that's going to stick with you. It's not going to be motivating. Why are these churches still there? Because they still motivate you 1,500 years later.
Yeah, I mean that is true. It's the Platonic ideal, and I think you're right. And that, again, I think that's the difference between high and low art. And we can use religion as most art was religious for most of human history up until very recently. It was all religious art. So they were, and obviously Greeks and Romans, but after that it was all biblically based art virtually for the past couple hundred years. So all art was that. And you're right. They were illustrating truth. They were attempting to achieve something, exceptional in that. So again, and I'll just use myself as an example. So Horace H. Hoover, right? It's a fun story. It's a fun character. It's an idea for a story. It takes a lot of time to do it.
Yes.
Let's use Horace as an example. Is he the Platonic ideal of a hero? And the answer is no. I mean, he could, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So is it worthwhile to use your example? I'm not doing he's not evil, he's not morally ambiguous, but he is not the sort of ideal or what somebody would consider an ideal. He's kind of a fun character. So is it worth my time to spend doing something that isn't that ideal? And go ahead.
Well, I mean, yeah, but is he trying to do the right thing? Is he trying to help people? Yeah. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be stereotypical about it. You need to be oriented in the right direction. And he still possesses a lot of the characteristics of a hero.
Yes.
But he's offbeat and quirky, and he's got some goofball friends.
But if the goal is that, why not, instead of going northwest, just go west, like go full bore and make
Sure.
Horus the ultimate ideal platonic hero. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Well, I mean, there's a few answers to that. One is not everyone responds to everything the same way. You know, a lot of people would say churches are old and boring, even though they are fantastically, they have fantastic pieces of art. Other people are going to relate to other things. Some people wouldn't like the same high-minded ideals as romantic fiction or even the pulps, and so you're going to get a lot of people who see. I think people can innately tell what's right and what's wrong, right? They have an innate sense of it, and when something feels true and when it doesn't, even if they can't put words to it. So that he's filling in a niche that a lot of other people don't have. I mean, in the same way that like J.R.R. Tolkien's Lord of the Rings is an extremely Catholic work. However, it's not overtly Catholic at all.
right.
And then again, I know we're talking about like kind of high art with writing, but Horace and Slurp and the rest of the crew, they can still embody these values without necessarily being like, well, I'm a good person doing things because it's right, young lad.
Right. And again, I mean, I did it, so I do believe that to some degree. You know what I mean? It's not like I themes in stories don't have to be explicit.
Right.
We learned that the hard way, unfortunately.
Yes.
So it's like they don't have to be explicit. You get a sense for what ultimately the story is about or the characters are doing, because all character is action, and et cetera, et cetera. To really dissect a Lord of the Rings or a Frankenstein, that's for college courses to like ad nauseum talk about the most mundane things and like apply some sort of like value to it. But let me just put a pin in that. I want to read some comments here because nobody ever comments on these videos. Let's see. I think at the time we thought it was better than it actually was. That was the 90s for sure. Hey, Gollum Wolf, how's it going? Just like any era, there's good and bad in everything. My sister was big into 90s boy bands, which I hated, but there was some good metal and rock stuff too. Dr. Mask, you mean all Greeks didn't look like that? No. It would be funny if there was like one Greek sculptor who did do fat people. So somewhere buried, like there is like a whole garden of like fat Greek people. There's like very mundane. Anyway, think more like Little Caesar body.
Yeah.
Yeah. WandaVision for sure. Thanks, Gollum Wolf. He's a guy with a vacuum on his head. He is, which is the platonic ideal, I think.
Yeah.
I think one thing is you never know how your creations will affect others. That's true.
Yeah.
One way or the other, I should say. I think I get what Fabrizio's saying, and maybe for me it's a Catholic thing, but I look at Caravaggio and wonder why I'm not trying to do that. Something bigger than me. Yeah, that's very much it. And it's like, I love Caravaggio, I love Horace H. Hoover, I love all of these things, and when you're presented with the opportunity cost of those, ultimately, why don't we do that? Or why don't we try to do that? I would like to preface this by saying I'm not going to stop doing Horace H. Hoover. But it's just something to think about. On my commute of 2 hours every day. I think also it might give a vision of hope to help people through these dark times, for sure.
Yeah. And I think if we think about Bernie Wrightson, it kind of helps. Bernie, he did a lot of comics, and I'm sure he would probably agree. Not all of those books were fantastic books. But you got to pay the bills,
Yeah.
and it helps sharpen your skills certainly. But then he was able to do his magnum opus, the Frankenstein piece, and that. Yeah, suck it, Da Vinci. Put him up against you any day. But that's the thing. You can't necessarily always view things as themselves. Like if you're questioning, should I just do Horace comics for the rest of my life? Well, if you think you can do bigger and better things, then no. Now, I would say, you should finish what you started, and if you were planning on 5 issues, do 5 issues. But after that, all the work that you put into Horace is going to translate. You're a much better artist now than when you started with issue 1.
Yeah.
So whatever else you want to go to, whether it is specifically a religious theme or it's some other kind of work that has, like higher aspirations in terms of being more inspirational or help people to through a dark time or whatever the specific goal you're looking for is, there's nothing wrong with doing these other things that will eventually get you to that goal.
Yeah, so two things about that. I think it's interesting that some of the best sculptures, including, at the Renaissance time, the reason those guys were such great sculptors is they were masons first. They were doing like actual work, and then, like you said, it translates into like actually being able to do amazing sculptures. And that's why a lot of those sculptures at that time, if you look at the hands, they are the like giant gnarly hands. And that wasn't a stylistic thing. It was because those dudes had these giant gnarly hands because they're working with stone all the time. The dainty sort of like artist was not a thing, that whole concept. But the other thing too is, as far as what to pick, again, the opportunity cost, it's never come up in sort of like my train of thought that much until recently, because I saw this body of work shrinking and these skills shrinking at such an extraordinary rate. To me, I'd be like, leave it up to the greats to do that. Leave it up to these like incredible painters. What few that we do have, that can then rival some of the great sculptors and painters. Let them do it. But now I'm just like, I wonder. I wonder. I don't know.
I mean, we're going through different times. Back in the day, you just had to sell yourself to one person and appease one person, and they would pay. Basically, they would pay for your life. Now, there's a lot of great artists. I would say even like look at stuff by Mitch and Elizabeth Breitweiser. A lot of their comics are amazing. The way they use color is fantastic. Had a bit of an issue with Allegiance Art, and it was a business thing. So now we are we're without a lot of their art. They're still in their prime, So it's it's in a lot of ways it is a different world that we live in now. But I think when you go back when the sky gets darker, the stars that are there shine brighter. And there's a lot of opportunity, I think, to produce great works that really have a lot of influence. And even if you look at like pulps, like you can even say H.P. Lovecraft. He's seen as one of the fathers of American horror. Everybody references his stuff, but he was pretty much unknown by the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah, so I'll kind of end this. I know you got to go soon. Dr. Mask mentioned this yesterday about work that inspires. And there's a Prince quote, I mentioned this. Watch this Prince interview, and he said, you either make music that inspires or you make music that discourages.
Yeah.
And I like to go a little further. It inspires or elevates, and discourages or denigrates. And I really think those are your options.
Yeah.
And especially in 2025, but for me, it's been 20 years. Like, there's nothing especially horrific about 2025. To me, I've seen it for 20 years, and it's just like, this is the outcome of terrible things. Yeah. But it does seem to accelerate just because that's the design of it. Let me read the last few comments here. Hey, Kibo, how's it going? Thanks for joining. Yeah, I like talking about art. I mean, comics are great, but I think there's a lot more overlap that doesn't really get discussed. For fear of being pretentious, for sure. I'm not afraid of being pretentious. Gollum Wolf. When I'm working on my own stories, my primary goal is entertainment. If my stories can help someone forget about the crap of the world while they read it, I call it successful. And I mean, I agree. Horace H. Hoover isn't gonna inspire somebody to fight occult, esoteric evils. I don't think. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, but maybe somebody says, "Holy crap, this is awesome! This
Yeah,
is way better than that crap Marvel's putting out. I want to draw like that."
that's true. Wholly agree with that sentiment. My goal is to entertain, but I have themes of good versus evil and temperance.
Yeah.
Albrecht Dürer started at his father's gold press before becoming an artist. Man, that dude, he's one of the greats. I agree with that. My comic definitely has some themes of heroism and redemption. If people pick up on that, great. If they don't pick up on it, I still enjoy it. Don't take the black pill.
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's. I
You
actually look
should
at it.
retitle this. Don't take the black pill.
Fabrizio is feeding people the black pill. No, I actually think of it as it's an opportunity cost thing, and it just hit me. So I would have never dreamed of doing anything else. I shouldn't say that. I like to oil paint. I like to sculpt. I like to do other things, but you know, I don't want to see a tradition of Western civilization sort of like wane, especially in the face of AI art. When I was at this advertising agency, we had a crop of new people, right? So I'm a
Oh
programmer,
boy.
and they were young. They were like right out of college, and I'm like, I went to school for fine art, and this was like 7 8 years later, and these younger people, I'm like, you know what? You're actually smart. You're clever. You're creative, but they don't know they went to school for web and computer science. And in my
Yeah.
head, I'm thinking in the past they would have gone for fine art and they would have been great artists, but they got diverted because of the new opportunity of web development. And I saw that as a shame. I'm like, you could have like honed your skills and you could be like a really good creative artist, but not. You're just a developer because you took that path. And I guess that's another reason I think now we have AI on coming around the bend. We have a lot of things that could potentially, well, not potentially. It'll change the landscape. That's
Sure.
undoubtedly. I don't know what that landscape is going to look like. It might be hellish.
Yeah, I mean, I can see people who know how art should work, know how to make real art, using AI as a tool and having it look good. But even now, we're a couple years into it, and I look at most of the AI art, and it sucks. And it doesn't suck just because it's six fingers. It sucked because the people using it don't understand how to compose an image. They don't understand what makes a good image, just from technical levels.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is, I was mentioning before, there's no more apprenticeships and this and that. And part of it is, back in the day, if you were going to be a sculptor, you were a stonemason first, and you had to chip at 10,000 different rocks before they'd be like, okay, now we'll all let you make a frog. And then you go up until you can get to humans and work with expensive materials like marble. So you understood what chisel was what. You understood how much pressure you had to use with the hammer and all these things. And it was the same with art. If we go back 150 years, most colleges in the late 1800s, you had to take some kind of art course. So, why do we see all these explorers going off to places and we have fabulous pen and ink drawings of, ancient ruins and African mountains that no one's ever seen? It's because they had to take the time to learn the tools. And this is one of the big problems with most art today is people, like even myself, I do watercolor that looks like a 5-year-old's finger paints because I went to school for a lot of this stuff, and no one ever sat me down and said like, okay, here's a class, just we're going to learn how to paint. Here's the different kind of brushes. If you do it this way, if it's wet, if it's dry, if we let it be wet and then we dry it and then we paint over it, and no one ever did that. So I never developed the skill for watercolor. And the problem is for a lot of other people, it's like ubiquitous. They can't use a pencil. Everything is too digital. If you really want to be a master and you want to learn well, it's those beginning steps that are going to get you there. A lot of people are just being thrown under the bus.
Yeah, and especially right now, YouTube has everything, for good or ill. And you'll find 10 different art tutorials, and they'll all kind of contradict each other.
Yeah.
Or even, this is even worse, they will reaffirm exactly what the other person has said, but it's not entirely right.
Yes.
I don't know if you know, there's a podcast called 3 Point Perspective. They run a school.
I don't know.
They run a school, and this one guy did a YouTube channel. And he said, "This is how you find the cone of vision in a drawing." And I watched him, and I'm like, "That is not how you find the cone of vision." He runs a school, and he didn't know how to do this. But meanwhile, this video had tens of thousands of views, and I put it in the comments. I'm like, "Just so you know, that's not how you find the cone of vision." But it's not, it'll get lost. Nobody will see that. So we have 20,000 potential noobs learning this incorrectly off the bat, which is terrible.
Yeah.
Hey, Michael Bancroft, how's it going?
Hey.
Thanks for popping in. When I write a line that sings itself, I pay myself 100 times. I love being pretentious. It's like, I knew you would come through. I sense a discussion of art and beauty was afoot. I think I'm art and Yang is beauty. I think that's the...
And I'm not the beauty, that's for sure.
I did an apprenticeship with Fanny illustrator Tom Kidd in the 90s while in college. Best thing ever. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Kibo, in mortuary restorative art, we were informed that we'd be making parts of the face, then a whole head reconstruction for a final. And the first 1,000 do not count.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the whole 10,000 bad pieces of art to get good, unfortunately, it is kind of true.
And you got to get 4 or 5 issues of Horace H. Hoover, at least, before you can move on and do better Horace or something else, And that's the goal, is you always want to be aiming up and up.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't even intend it. Getting a little nerdy into anime, there was Neon Evangelion is a famous series in this and that, and it was psychology and all sorts of great things involved. And the guy who created that, he was burned out by the time it was done, and he needed a palate cleanse, and he did a little series called Fulikuli, FLCL, and that is one of the greatest works of art to ever come out of Japanese anime. And it was supposed to be a nothing.
Yeah, it's funny. I always think about, like, if you take a break, I play guitar. If I haven't played guitar for like a week or two and you sit down and play, you play the best stuff. You write the best riffs. You write the best licks. So there is something to be said about that, like switching your mindset for a bit and then coming back to it. You have a whole other appreciation.
And sometimes not trying is hard, and the whole YouTube thing on my channel, the best video I have that's, like tens of thousands of views more than anything else is something I whipped out in 20 minutes because I was like, I need to put out a video this week.
All right. Well, thanks for popping in. I appreciate it. Thanks for everybody in the chat. This was fun. We should talk about art more often. I like making fun of modern art. I think we should just devote our time to making fun of bad modern art.
Sounds good. Well, I believe that you will be on my channel on the 13th. We'll be talking about art and horror and art and
yes, that's right.
How it affects us.
So you're going to be going to where should people pick you up at?
I don't know. Check with me on Twitter. I'll post it in a few minutes. There's a guy, Chubby Funster, who does tabletop games, and it's one of his friends' channels.
Awesome.
But I don't know which one. So,
all right, everybody check Twitter.
We'll find out soon.
Thanks for joining, and we'll talk to you later. Thanks, everybody.
All right. Night, everyone.